What's up and welcome back to my channel. I'm really sorry if you hear any rain in the background because it's raining, but you know, a girl's gotta film. So today is going to be my worst books of 2019. I know that it's been a couple days since the beginning of the year and I'm a little behind with my end of the year videos, but I really wanted to make sure that I was done reading for 2019 before I actually film these videos. So let's go ahead and spill some tea on the worst books that I read in 2019. I have 10 books to talk about today. These aren't in any particular order. I didn't sit here and figure out which one I hated the most or anything like that. I saw on so many other people's channels that they had to put like a disclaimer about how, you don't mean to like hurt the author's feelings and all of that stuff. But yeah, I'm just gonna say that like these were not my favorite books. Obviously, if you liked them, that's great. These books weren't for me, and so if you don't want to, hear what I didn't like about them, then don't watch this video. Number one on this list is Elevation by Stephen King. And this actually I read at the beginning of last year, and it was my very first Stephen King novel that I finished. I tried reading The Shining back in 2018 and I ended up DNFing it at like 100 pages because I was extremely bored. I picked up Elevation at the beginning of 2019 because I wanted to try out a Stephen King book and it was really tiny, so I thought, why not start with this one? So I ended up reading it, and the only reason I finished it was because I needed it for a challenge in my book club. I needed the points for reading it. I tortured myself and finished reading through it, and I just didn't like it at all. Like, I'm pretty sure I rated it 1 star, and this book just was like the weirdest book I've ever even encountered in my life. It was about this guy that was losing weight according to the scale, but wasn't losing weight in appearance. And that's all I know or remember or even cared to remember about it. So did not like that book, thought it was extremely weird. It was not a horror book, even though that's what it was like labeled as. And yeah, if you've read it, you probably know what I'm talking about and you probably understand why I didn't like it. Next up on the list is The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. And this book was terrible. It was extremely long, like compared to what it needed to be. And it was really, really boring. Like I don't know. It was one of the worst thrillers I've read in 2019. This book is about this lady that is like a germaphobe. I forget exactly what that's called, but she wasn't able to go out of her house because of, there's germs and stuff. So she stayed in the house, she drank all the time. It's just an unreliable narrator type of book, and it just, by the time I got to the end when the twist was happening, I had given up a long time ago. It could have definitely been done a lot better. It could have been faster paced and just been more interesting. It was extremely boring, which I think I say that on a lot of these books. So that's my main problem with the worst books that I've read this year, is that they were all thriller books that, described themselves as great, amazing, thrilling reads and all of that kind of stuff, and it just wasn't true. Okay, the next book on this list is my favorite half nightstand. This was by Christina Lauren. This was my second Christina Lauren book I think I read this year, and I was not impressed. I believe I rated it 2 stars, and I just thought it was really bad because it was labeled as new adult, or I think the characters were 28 or 29, which is even older than me, and they were acting like they were 15. I thought they were incredibly immature. I don't remember much about the book, except a lot of it I think was done through text messages and stuff. And I just remember thinking this whole, throughout the whole book, I was like, these people are so immature. I feel like they're in high school. I feel like they're making a big deal out of little things. And so I just couldn't relate to the story. I thought it was very bad. I feel like if it was labeled young adult, then sure, great, that's cool. But I don't know, having adult characters that are almost 30 or in their 30s, I just feel like they shouldn't have written a book like that with characters that were that old. The next book on this list is The River at Night, and I read this book because I heard from a couple people that they really, really loved it. I heard that it was supposed to be a great thriller, creepy, atmospheric, but it was really bad. I think I rated it 2 stars, and it took me a whole month to read. And I remember thinking when I was reading it that it was only at the halfway point in the book before they even got to the river. I just couldn't believe that it took the whole beginning half of the book for the women drama to turn into like them actually going to the river, because it was about like group of, I think it was like 4 or 5 like girlfriends that decided that they wanted to like take a trip and go to like a, not cabin, but like a, not a resort, like a retreat, but like in the woods or like next to a river. And I think they end up like going in the middle of nowhere, and then someone dies, and then they like stumble upon this like crazy, it's like the only twist in the book, so I can't really like give it out, but they stumble upon something and the book takes a really weird turn. Doesn't make any sense. It was just like a train wreck. It was bad. Next up on my list is The Escape Room, and this I also believe I gave 2 stars. This was again a thriller that was said to be like super thrilling, but I found it just entirely boring. It's about these, I think they were like lawyers or attorneys, and they all like get stuck in this like elevator slash escape room thing because someone's framing them. And the whole entire book is them in this like escape room. Nothing's happening, or it feels like the same thing is happening over and over again. It was boring. Just didn't like it. Didn't think it was like I thought the storyline of the escape room was original. I did like that part, but I just felt like it could have been so much more fast paced and cooler things could have happened within the story to make it more interesting. And then I probably would have liked it. Next up on the list is Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, and I know that I'm probably one of the only booktubers putting this book on their list. I think everybody else in the world loved this book and I didn't. I gave this book 2 stars and I feel like it could have been done way better. I actually need to pull up my Goodreads review because there were so many things that I had a problem with in this book, and so I want to make sure that I capture all of my disappointment, I guess. Okay, so before we get into like what I didn't like about this book is supposed to be a like smart housey thriller where a nanny gets hired to watch these, I think it's three children, and the smart house is like doing weird mysterious things and it might be haunted, and like I think then like the children die or a child dies. So that's like the premise, okay? So I wrote about how this was paced extremely slow. There's a lot of description for the atmosphere of the book, so I do know that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people liked it, but there weren't any twists until the very last 50 pages of the book. Like, I am not going to read a thriller and only have twists at the very last 50 pages. That is a waste of time for me. I said that the writing style was really weirdly written because it was told by the protagonist's view in a letter, but the conversation was casual and very awkward at times. So like the way that this was written was our protagonist was in jail because she was the nanny and got accused of murdering the children. So you already know that from the very beginning of the story, and it's told from a letter perspective of her writing a letter to her lawyer saying about how it wasn't her. But the whole entire book is the letter. This book also ended with what I don't like in a thriller, and so it was that there was a letter at the end also saying about everything that happened. So it was like, you know, the last page, and it was like, oh, this is why all of this happened, blah, blah, blah. 2 twists that did happen in the last 50 pages were unoriginal. It's been done over and over again in a thriller, and it's one of the ones that I really dislike. And I actually just read a book that had that happen too. Oh, in Her Pretty Face, that same exact thing happened. So I've been reading so many thrillers with this, and I do not like it. The protagonist claims to be a nanny with 10 years of an experience, but she was literally the stupidest nanny I've ever encountered, because I was a nanny for 3 years, and she would just like do really stupid stuff, and I was like, how are you a nanny but you let the child do something so unsafe like that? It just did not make sense to me. I really disliked the children in this book because they were incredibly naughty. And after the whole like letter reveal where it was like, this is why all of this stuff happened, the whole like 85% of the book before that had like, it's like it played no part. It was like she just wrote it to be creepy and ominous, and then it was like, oh, I gotta throw the twist in here, threw the twist in there, but it didn't like relate to any of the other parts of the book. That's everything I disliked about The Turn of the Key. It could have been done a lot better. The next book that is on my worst books list is Before I Fall, and I read this for the reading rush because I needed a book to movie adaptation, and I had already read or watched like all of the books that I actually wanted to for that challenge. So I had to read this terrible young adult book that I despised. I forget if I rated it 1 or 2 stars, but it's one of the whiniest young adult books I've ever read in my entire life. I couldn't even like get through the majority of the movie because the movie was just as bad as the book. Like, all of the actresses were so incredibly whiny about this girl that wakes up the next morning and she lives the last day of her life 7 times until she realizes that by making even the slightest changes, she may hold more power than she ever imagined. In my review, I wrote about how a lot of the people were like extremely spoiled and rude to everyone, and it was just like a book filled with drama. And then also I said it was too long, too repetitive, and the whole moral of the story was don't be a bully. So I feel like, especially for me reading it at the age of 27, it was just a total waste of time. Like, maybe I guess if you have like a 10-year-old daughter, but then at the same time, I don't want my 10-year-old daughter like reading just how mean these girls were. Like, I just don't know. Maybe it was because I was homeschooled my whole life, but I just cannot believe that people let children be like this in an actual world. Okay, the next book that I did not like was Girl Stop Apologizing by Rachel Hollis, and I thought I was actually gonna really like this book because I loved her first book, which was Girl Wash Your Face. I thought it was a great read. I love self-help books, so it was a really good one. But this one was completely the opposite. I think it was because she must have been like on a book deal where she had to write a second book, but she didn't have any content for that book. So a lot of it was extremely repetitive, and she tried to relate to you without doing a good job with it. So like, for instance, she would be like, oh, don't care about like how you look, like just be happy with yourself. And then she would say about how she got breast implants and it just makes her feel so much better. So it was just extremely weird. It felt like she was kind of like throwing everything in our face and just like acting like she was rich and privileged. Like, it almost just became like a white privileged girl book. Like, that's what it was. Like, honestly, I didn't get anything out of it. I thought it was a total waste of time. I believe I rated it 1 star, and I would never recommend it to anybody. Like, I would recommend her first book, would never recommend her second book. I said in my review, I said, I couldn't relate to one single thing. It felt like Rachel was bragging about herself. She talks about being comfortable with yourself, but then talks about her boob job. She talks about asking for help and how they have a housekeeper. These tips are not fixes for the average person. I've never read a book that literally was someone bragging about their life before. So for instance, yeah, she would say like, oh, if you need help, like ask for help. But like, not all of us have a lot of money to be able to have a housekeeper to clean our house for us or to watch our children for us. You know what I mean? So it just didn't feel like anyone could relate to this actual book. Okay, last book on this list is How to Walk Away by Catherine Center. And I actually have a whole vlog that's gonna be going up very shortly, like within the next week or so, that's filled with spoilers for this book. So if you agree with me and think that it wasn't that great of a book, then you probably want to keep an eye out for that video because you're probably going to want to hear everything that I thought about it. But I'm just going to say here that this book was a 2-star read for me. I actually really enjoyed the first half. Like, I thought it was very promising, thought it was very emotional, but then the second half turned into this weird, cheesy romance, and I just could not believe that that's like the turn that the book made. Like, I felt like it didn't need to actually have a romance in it. I felt like it was more believable not having that romance. And then the whole trip to her ex-fiance's wedding, like, what? I don't know. If you know, you know. But anyway, I really hope you guys are excited to watch that vlog with spoilers because I obviously have way more thoughts about it. But since all of my disappointment thoughts were in the second half of the book, I can't really talk about it just randomly because I don't want to give anything away. That's it for this video. These are all of the books that I thought were the worst books that I read in 2019. Of course, there's probably some other ones that could have been in this video, but I didn't want to make it too long and just have like an excessive amount of books. These were just the ones that I thought were like the most disappointing that I would never tell other people to read. These were just the ones that were the worst in my opinion. Hopefully none of you guys were offended by this video. We're all friends here, okay? Hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys soon with the best books of 2019. Bye everyone.